Hey guys, Anil from Live, Breathe, Believe. Join with Indira Kennedy and Fred Samanta. How are you both doing?
Really well. Great.
Very
Awesome.
good, thank you.
Awesome. Hey, so, I mentioned to you guys when we last caught up that I've started a little bit of a series on the back of my chats with Indira on the 8 elements. This series is around what I like to call the uncomfortable truth. And the reason why I thought of that, those words is I think there are things that we go about in life and, we have the tendency to distract ourselves, kind of avoid, or we have the tendency to feel it and feel uncomfortable and kind of like, well, why do I feel uncomfortable about it? And growing up, something my sister said is like, it's just a matter of learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so today, I wanted to chat with you guys about spirituality. And the reason why I want to talk about it is, Indira, when we first spoke, I think it was we started chatting less than 9 months ago, there was something you said at the time, and you said, Anil, I am not my mind. And I was just like, huh, okay, what does that mean? But I was like, respectful. I was like, cool, okay, Indira, like, awesome, sounds great. But it didn't click. And then I would say over the last 9 months, the journey I've been on trying to understand, like, why does that make me feel uncomfortable? Why does someone saying that not register? It just started to, and then in the last couple of weeks since we've been working together, I'm like, aha, I get it now. You're not your mind, and I just thought, like, when we talk about mind, we talk about heart, and the kind of like that dynamic between head and heart and spirituality. So with those kind of topics running through my head and making me feel at times a bit uncomfortable, I just love to chat with you guys about it to become more comfortable about it. Is that a fair shout?
Great. Well,
Wonderful.
I'm curious about what's shifted the understanding for you.
Yeah, I think I think the first shift is just actually being able to appreciate it. Like, it almost would say we're not our mind. There's so much going on around us, whether it's energy outside, whether it's energy within, whether it's thoughts that we have, whether it's feelings and sensations that we have within. Like, it's just I get you when you say, hey, I am not my mind. You're much more than it. It's maybe part of it, but there's so much more. And I think that's where it clicked for me to go, okay, I really want to explore and understand more to it. So in there, like, now I can actually ask you comfortably, why are you not your mind? And where does that stem from? And I may feel uncomfortable when I hear your answer, but at least I'll be on that journey to understanding it further. And Fred, I know that it's something that you and I have chatted about when it comes to ego, when it comes to procrastination. I just feel like these all connect somehow. And, even you brought up the whole thing about spiritual confidence. In there, we've talked about the spiritual warrior. Just all these words the dots started to connect over the last couple of weeks. And I'm just kind of like, huh, no wonder I was uncomfortable. These guys helped me become that much more comfortable. So, Indira, does that kind of answer what you were
Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely answer. It is what it is, Anil. Yeah.
Oh, fair. But Indira, maybe you can take it from there. Like, we talk about, you've spoken to me about head and heart, and you've talked to me about your journey with spirituality. Kind of, did you ever feel uncomfortable about spirituality? Did it ever make you feel uneasy? Yeah, maybe you can kind of share your feelings.
My uncomfortable truth with it. Yeah, and I will come back to the head versus heart. I'm not my mind. I'm not my brain either. So I think that's a really important distinction to make for me in spirituality, actually. But yes, I've been uncomfortable with it. I was raised with a religion, not one that we were particularly committed to, but I was made to go to Sunday school, and I was made to go to church when I was too old for Sunday school. My mother would drop me off and go home and come back and get me. So it wasn't like the whole family was there, but I was brought up with 3 different religions in the family, actually. So the Scottish grandmother, Presbyterian, English grandparents, Church of Christ, and my parents were Methodist. So in a sense, and beyond that, and I think I have told the story before, was I come from an incredibly intuitive family. So I've always had this awareness of another world, something beyond what we can see. can see and touch and feel. And sort of, so I've always had a very expanded awareness of even my father showing me the moon through a telescope when I was 7 took my idea of the world beyond to the planets, you know, like I went flying with him when I was 7. I was up above the world. So I feel really fortunate, and I've always been incredibly creative. So I've had this sense of something coming through me, and just, I don't know, an awareness of the other. And perhaps that's what took me into then wondering, what else is there? What more is there? And I felt really unhappy not being able to have direct contact with that other realm, that thing, that awareness, whatever was trying to communicate with me almost. And then once I got on what I would call a true philosophy of a spiritual path, if you like, which was yoga. I think I was always on a spiritual path, but I found a form that would work for me to actually help me understand it more and work with it and access whatever was coming to me. And then I found a phenomenal realm, way beyond anything that I could imagine. And that's when I sort of truly learned I am not my brain and I am not my mind. My meditation experiences mostly showed me that. But that's not a comfortable thing when the rest of the world is telling you to be extremely logical, rational, left-brained, and I am. I'm highly analytical. I think I have a very even balance between being, you know, the more global, spatial, creative, and the very analytical side of me as well. But it tends to get, that's where you're pulled as you get older. Whereas as a child, they say, go play and paint, and here's all the hobby things, you know, like that's all fostered. And then suddenly you're pulled into something that says, no, that doesn't really, that's not really important. It's not of any real value. And that became extremely uncomfortable for me, because it is part of who I am and what I know.
How about you, Fred? Where does it stem from you?
So one part was about not being the mind, and one part was about like spirituality in general.
Yeah.
When you mentioned this, that you realized you're not your mind, it made me think of a slightly different take on the same thing, which is don't believe everything you think, which I really like. And you know, it might not be exactly the same thing, but it's in the same realm of if you define it as the thinking mind. I would say, you know, I'm not my thinking mind, and I don't have to believe everything I think. And it's very nice because it allows me to think freely. It doesn't really say anything about me that I have certain thoughts, that they can just come and go, and I don't have to judge myself. And I can practice observing them more explicitly. And that reminds me, it's a little fountain of thought that just goes off all the time, and it's just there. Just like the sensations and energetic profile in my body is also a little bit, sometimes a little heavy, sometimes a little buzzing, sometimes there's a lightness, sometimes there's more joy and warmth, and then those things also come and go, the sensations in the body. So the thoughts in the thinking mind and the sensations in the body all just come and go. And as you're saying, Anil, they are part of my experience, but they don't define me singularly. And I think those kind of insights came along with my developing spirituality. So maybe, you know, in that sense, we are head, body, and spirit, or something like that. And maybe you could say I'm very fortunate that I didn't grow up in a religious or very spiritual home, because I feel like my spirituality is my own. It's something I developed as a grown-up. That it for me it's similar to a child discovering sexuality, and that the people around them might see the, first attempts or first explorations of sexuality before the child even knows what they are. And then we kind of, that part of us comes alive and we realize we're sexual beings. And the analogy goes a little bit further, because if you were to meet a person who was totally asexual, it would be difficult to explain this desire, the sexual desire. And they would say, you're just making this up, I don't have that. And it would be like, yes, someone doesn't have it and someone has it. And for me, it's not the same drive, but it's a similar thing, that a side of me woke up, the spiritual side of me, and something like a spiritual desire woke up. And yeah, similarly, it would be similarly difficult to explain sexuality to someone who's genuinely asexual. I think it's difficult to explain spirituality to someone who's genuinely not in touch with their spirituality.
So let me just a thought on that, because between the two of you, there are a lot of things that kind of popped into my mind. So one, I'm one who used to believe that spirituality is linked to religion, that they're one and the same, but I do feel that they're not. But this is something I'd like to hear from you. But also even the point that you raised, Fred, about spiritual, like explaining spirituality to maybe to an atheist is like talking about a sexual desire to someone who's asexual. It's like it may not compute. So maybe we start with the first piece. Indira, do you feel that spirituality and religion are one and the same? Do you think they're different?
I think religion's a form of spirituality. I think there's a common spirituality that shows up in every religion, but there's been a formalizing or a structure put around it, and can become a dogma as well. So, and that's why I chose actually to practice yoga as a philosophy, because there's still structure and teachings, but I found that they were freer for me. There was an underlying truth and no guilt. It doesn't foster guilt and it doesn't foster fear. So, in fact, it fosters love and abundance. So, and courage and all these great attributes that are within us as well. And so in that sense, I feel very free to be and have it be whatever I want it to be, whatever I choose for it to be. And I really do have a very conscious choice that I make about what I accept about it, the teachings, and even the way the communities form, the organisations around it, and what I just leave aside. So in that sense, I'm a bit of a rebel, I suppose.
So then on the back of what Fred mentioned in terms of like explaining spirituality, sexual desires to an asexual, spirituality to an atheist, like why do you think that's a source of discomfort for one or the other? If I'm understanding it, let's say that dynamic correctly.
Are you asking Fred or me?
Well, I was actually looking to you, Indira, but I mean, either or. I guess it's it's me helping me understand the dynamic, because I feel again that's a source of discomfort. Like explaining spirituality to an atheist or sexual desire to an asexual person. Why is there that source of discomfort?
I think it's very hard to understand something that you haven't yet experienced, but there's potential. I think it's alive within all of us. Sexuality is there, it's part of us. I think because I truly believe that I am the divine source, that's core to me, therefore I can't ignore that energy and what it's asking to create through me, or the power that's driving. It's like looking in the mirror and seeing yourself. So I can't ignore that longing. It's a very deep longing for me that comes up when I'm getting disconnected from it. and I feel like something's missing. And but I think that's such a personal experience. And as you've discovered, Anil, I said to you, I'm not my mind. You know, you said to me, wise heart, how can your heart be wise? So there comes a time when some awareness breaks through, and that's happened to me all the way along as well. Kept asking questions, kept asking myself, what am I really looking for here? Trying to get my head around what's going on with energy and so forth. So, and I don't really try to explain it to others all that frequently, because I think we do need to find it for ourselves. But my role is to be there when someone is put in front of me who's asking those questions. And you were asking those questions, Anil.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. Fred,
So I think religion is to spirituality what fast food is to nutrition. That they are related, and the spirituality is the inner part, this side that people have more or less of an explicit relationship with, and religion is man's attempt, man and woman, humans' attempt to capture and to grasp and to put into a system that idea of the divine and spiritual development.
I find that it's a funny thing. I actually feel uneasy right now. I'm kind of like, okay, hang on a second. Like it's when you guys think about this, and like I think like you just said, Indira, now, you know, it's personal. And it's only when someone provokes the question, asks the question to learn, to understand, you're willing to, you're like, that's when it's like it feels natural to share. But I mean, Fred, even when you say right now, like actually you said in the past, you're like, you're spiritually curious, you know, almost people are sexually curious. So you're kind of keen to understand and learn more.
Mm-hmm.
How, and by the way, this is a question to go to either of you both. How did you each find your own way to overcome your discomfort and basically kind of build on that curiosity, whether it was to understand yourselves better spiritually, sexually, especially when you know you're going to encounter people who probably will resist it or may not see it the same way, or yeah, see it completely differently. Fred, you can go first if you got the answer.
I'm looking at Fred as well. I feel like it should answer this one.
I don't know. I don't think it's been that complicated for me because it came to me later in life. So it's just something I've been, you know, doing and thinking about for the last 7 years. And then I started connecting the dots in a different way in terms of human behavior and my own development and my own intentions. And so for me, that has probably been less problematic. It was kind of a short journey, and I do think, you know, it still means that I don't know what's ahead, and I think that requires some humility. But I think I went from nothing in terms of my relationship to my spirituality to being comfortable quite quickly. The one thing that was difficult for me was, so I changed a lot, and I think my health improved, my relationships improved. Um, my relationship with professional endeavor did not improve. So that was the difficult part for me, where I would say it took like 3-4 years to reconcile that. That I wanted, all of a sudden, it was so much more important to do meaningful work and those kind of things, and relationship with money, and that's where the challenge was for me in my, you know, then newly discovered spirituality.
Are you saying that you wanted to not focus on those things, or they became more important to you?
I wanted to not focus on those things. I could not reconcile my newfound spirituality with, you know, the idea of like just doing a job for a paycheck, let's say.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I find that interesting is like, I think I just kind of jotted down a note here. It's like, sexual curiosity comes at a much younger age. I mean, I'm sorry, random share, but my nephew, he's he had his first sex ed class, and he's 11 years old, and he came home and he told his mom that, and my sister's like, I'm really sorry about it, and he's like, no, it is what it is. And it's like, that curiosity at that young age. Spirituality, on the other hand, I was raised as a Hindu, but I went to a private Christian school. So when I moved to India, people ask me, what's your religion? I'm like, well, I'm Christian. They're like, no, you're Hindu. Well, actually, you're Jain. Well, actually, you're. So I was like, okay, so I there is a God. So I believe in God, and therefore I am spiritual. And then when I started dating, people would be like, oh, so are you religious? And I'm like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And I was like, that's a really good question. I need to go figure that out. So it's just, I find it interesting that like from a young age, that sexual curiosity, so to speak, is like this physical curiosity that you're kind of figuring out. Whereas, as you rightly said, Fred, that spiritual curiosity comes later in life when your brain is starting to, and I know this is why I get back to, I am not my mind, I'm not my brain. I'm like, the brain starts to kick in and go, oh, but what is spirituality? Isn't that religion? No, it's not. Okay, it's more. Okay, there's a universe and there's energy. And that's when you start to realize, hang on, what's tuning me into this frequency to understand this differently than I have in the past.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like, again, lost in thought there, but again, feel free, Indira, Fred, jump in if
I've got something to say. What occurs to me about that is that comes from my own spiritual healing teaching is, and some might be challenged by the idea of past lives or that we've been anywhere else before we were on the planet. But that the understanding is that we actually separate ourselves from source, and we choose to come into this physical world. And the whole journey of being in the physical life of the planet is to come back to remembering who we were, who we are at our core. And so there is a forgetting and a remembering. And I like the word remember, because it's like we remember as parts of ourselves, members, and we remember back to who we are. And in my yoga, the idea is that we do that while we're on the planet, not at death, not when we've gone back and suddenly, oh, that was what it was all about. So we choose to come to learn love. And that's the whole crux of it. We're here to learn love. And I think I've said before, when I saw my kids not doing so well at times with the way they were behaving, the thing that I remembered for myself was they're just learning how to love. I'm just learning how to love. So how can I bring more love to this situation? How could I see this in a more loving way? And I can be more forgiving of others when I'm judging their behavior as not so loving, is they're just learning how to love. But I have to then stand in that love. So my experience has been different from Fred's in that when I went deeper, if you like, through yoga into spirituality and wanting to read the ancient texts, and I wanted the truth. I want to know. And I don't know if the brain and the mind can ever truly know anyway, but I'm prepared to say there are certain things I am prepared to believe as truths. It helps me. I'm going to anchor myself to those things. And the rest is I'll find out maybe one day whether it was true or not. But I'm prepared to accept this as my truth. But my desire was to be even more abundant, really lift energy, be far more hopeful, optimistic. I found there was an energy was released to do more, serve more, set up my business. It was like, there is more to this, there is more to life. And so I had to sort out my relationship with money and all those things too. But I recognized that I am here for a purpose. And then it became, I don't want to run out of time. I'm more worried about running out of time before I fulfill my purpose. And even that's a head thing. So, living my purpose in every moment. And it also actually helped me give up the need to really judge who I should be helping. It's an odd thing. It's like I became more laser-like about who to help. And at the same time, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing as long as I'm helping, as long as I'm adding to the betterment of this place and living love. So it's really my choice. That's my free will. How I do it, what kind of business. The most important thing is I'm being of service and I'm being a conduit for that energy to do its work. So the uncomfortable bit for me is, and I was talking about this just this morning actually on a community call I was on, the uncomfortable bit is knowing how to be consciously cooperative with that energy.
How to cooperate with that energy. I find it interesting because I know we talked at the start about head and heart, and I want to tie us back to that and spend a little time. Indira, you mentioned how you wanted to go spiritually deeper into, the truth, to understand the truth. Fred, you said earlier, don't believe everything you think. And so my way to kind of link the two is, well, I always hear the expression, well, listen to your heart. What does your heart say? And so it's like, okay, there's already that potential conflict between head and heart, listen to, don't believe what you think, don't believe what you see, versus like, listen to your heart. And you're like, well, why would I? Like, this is rational and this is maybe irrational. But then Indira, you go into, well, you wanted to go maybe into what's considered irrational by going into the spiritual aspect, which probably requires you to tune in more with your heart and actually listen to your heart. So maybe we can just chat a bit about what is it that then, does spirituality potentially cause a conflict between head and heart?
So I think spirituality causes a conflict between different states. That there is something that's non-dual, unified, and then there is no mine and yours and this kind of thing. And then there is something which is, and that's along the lines of being. And then there is something which is like, there is a car coming my way, I should jump aside, or I need to take care of my physical environment and arrange for more or less comfort and a more or less materialistic environment, and that part is becoming. And those are the two things that I think we need to reconcile. And the head works a lot with becoming. Like, what should I do next? What should I worry about? It comes up with things for us to fear and worry about all the time. It's a survival instinct, right?
Sure. And building on that too, this is where the external world, we start taking a lot of notice about what other people are telling us we should or shouldn't be, and how we should be, and the kind of world we're entitled to live in, what we're allowed to have because of who we are, where we were born, what sex we are, all that sort of thing. And for me, I recognize that I'm actually incredibly egalitarian in that sense. I don't believe in anybody telling me essentially that I can or can't have according to their belief systems. So, and I learned that I am the creator of my existence. I do have a say in this. And most of what I'm living is somebody else's idea that they brought into being. Do I agree with it? Want it? A lot of the time, no, actually. And then it becomes a bit more of a discomfort around, well, what do I want? And how will I create this? What will I do? And at the same time, I have to engage with the structures of my world.
Yeah.
That I decided that I would use them to my advantage. And then I leave, and I can leave the rest. So I decided that I can engage with all of that and I can still choose the level of quality of my existence. And that's not always easy because sometimes, you know, I want certain jobs, certain clients, a certain house, whatever. There are external constraints that come into play.
I just want to jump in on that. I found what you just said there incredibly powerful in there in terms of I am the creator of my existence. And honestly, if there's an expression that can make anyone feel uncomfortable, it would probably be that. Like, well, what do you mean I'm the creator of my own existence, you know? And then you even go one step further and you're like, not only that, I am the creator of the quality of my existence. And they're probably like, wait, no, hang on. You know what I mean? So it's like, I find that just absolutely powerful. And it's, you know, I think to something I've heard, you know, in Indira, we've spoken about this, like what Joe Dispenza says, like if you're, and I love Fred, how you said it. Actually, I'm going to quote you first. You know, what should I worry about next? That's what the mind is thinking, right? The brain's like, oh, okay, so what can I worry about next? I'm not worried about enough yet. I need something else. I'm just so used to that. I'm addicted to worrying. You know, Joe Dispenza says, you know, when the emotion settles, what you're left with is wisdom. And I just kind of think like, you know, that's where I feel, you know, when we think about a wise heart, Indira, like that's where I feel it's almost like somehow that wisdom gets distilled through your body to your heart. And maybe that's when your heart starts to kind of channel and try to connect to the frequency outside. And it starts to kind of nurture that curiosity, that spiritual curiosity potentially, and starts to kind of go, hey, why don't you dig deeper and find out the truth and learn more and understand more rather than, you know, let your mind hold you back. Fred, as you said, what is it going to worry about next? Or, you know, don't believe everything you think. It's like letting that heart almost guide you in a way to kind of learn more and seek the truth, seek insight, seek wisdom, ask questions, especially the things that you're not comfortable with or you are feeling uncomfortable about. I'm like, I feel like it's
there's as you're saying that, I think there's a parallel as well between, for example, pain and suffering, right? There's a physical pain and then the mind suffers. And sometimes the physical sensation passes very quickly, but the mind can suffer and dwell and obsess on something for a very long time. And that part is optional. So we see that something happens to our body and it's inevitable, you know, it's a real punch in the gut. But then the story that we tell about this is my fault, I deserve it, it always happens to me, it's going to happen again, that's you know, that's something else.
Yeah. And likewise with the brain, you know, I mean, even in mindfulness and neuroscience, they talk about the amygdala at the back of the brain, deep in the middle of the back of the brain. That's the fear center, right? That's looking out for us to be safe and very reactive. And they want us to move into the frontal lobe, into the executive center, where we can be more rational, more cultivated and cultured about our responses instead of just reacting out of fear, which is your fight, flight, freeze kind of response. So we even know that about the brain. And I'm thinking that we tend to go from brain to, oh, I've got a mind that could actually manage that brain. And they still don't know where the mind sits. They don't know where the mind exists. Like nobody can tell us that. And so, but we know there's a mind. And then our wisdom and our hearts, for me, is going into the subtle realm of the heart, not just the physical heart. But I think perhaps we got the journey the wrong way round. And I suspect this is what I'm doing now. It's a bit of an aha for me, is I'm tending to work more centered on the heart and my inner self in order to then see what my mind is doing and bringing it into play, and using the brain as almost the hardware for the software to be working in order to live it in the external world. So my mind and how having a healthy brain is really, really important to me, and managing my thoughts and managing my mind in order for me to be able to then make better choices, see the opportunities, be guided. So when I talk about I'm not my mind, I do have the experience of being separate from any thought at all, and yet I am conscious and something is guiding me. And in meditation gives you that state, gives you the experience of that state. And it's that state that in an enlightened being, apparently, is in that state all the time, but then can be using the mind and the brain.
I love that, because I feel like, again, my interpretation of that, Indira, if, not to use my mind incorrectly, but at least like letting my heart listen in and kind of say, hey, it's, on the back of what Fred said, your mind will weave a story, and that story can linger for however long, but you need to rely on separating yourself from your thoughts to allow wisdom to kind of come through, potentially from your heart, from that spiritual side, from that curiosity that allows you to just be open to more than what you can see, hear, touch, feel, and go beyond those senses. And I know we're a bit low on time for today, so I just maybe any final thoughts. I feel like we can go on this topic for hours, and I just feel like the uncomfortable truth of blank. You can add anything probably from this conversation, and it can be an uncomfortable truth that we chat about, but just, I want to give you both the opportunity. Just any closing thoughts, Indira, Fred?
Your turn, Fred.
Okay. Yes, I think when I sometimes say, because the mind is used to mean so many different things, that sometimes I specify the thinking mind, just to put it to that part, whereas you could argue, or by a different definition, everything is mind. Then used more in the sense of like consciousness and experience and perception, that is all in our mind in another sense. So mind expanding is the same kind of thing, that more things are in mind. And the thinking mind is a very jittery, worrying, this kind of thing. It's about survival and fulfilling needs and figuring stuff out and planning and trying to learn from past experience and so on. And when we go into the body, everything slows down. In the body, things happen more slowly, and it's more direct. It's about what we are experiencing right now. So that's just as a simple exercise to get out of the mind by actively getting into the body, and which is like fascinating in terms of, I'm having an experience right now and I can feel my left big toe. And when I say that, and when we do that, it's really unclear to me what's happening. Like, how can I pay attention to the sensation in my big left toe? It's like, looking, but without eyes. You go somewhere and you feel something. And then when I do that, I'm not thinking as much.
Love it.
Well, we know that the heart has got a brain as well. Like there's a lot of studies done on this now as well. Science is really catching up with all of this, and it's brilliant. So kind of adding to what you've been saying, Fred, and especially around suffering. I mean, we know now that any physical sensation that comes up from a thought lasts about 1.5 minutes. So if we're in pain for anything longer than that because of our thoughts, I'm not talking physical pain as we've hurt ourselves, it's because we are stacking pain-provoking thoughts. And we can go back and tell a whole story of thoughts, each one of which is going to be provoking some kind of physical, emotional response that we could find is uncomfortable and call it painful as well. So when I want to move myself out of that kind of story, the easiest thing for me to think is, well, what's Source's view of this? Is if I really step back and I get out of the story, it's what would compassion see, or what would truth see? What's its view of what's going on? And it's amazing how quickly the pain dissipates, because my mind has gone to a whole other story. It's gone to a different viewpoint as well. And hopefully it's one that's more of a truth than a worry or a fantasy, essentially a fantasy. So it comes down to, we didn't get to desire, but I know you and I, Fred, really want to talk at some point about desire. And I think there's a difference between desires that are chemically created through ideas and whatever's happening in the body, and a deep heartfelt desire that is a truly motivating force as well. So I guess my parting words is stay out of the head and start with the heart. So you can move into the head, but start with the heart.
It's funny you should say that. I have a coach who said to me once upon a time, like, do you pay rent to live in your head? I'm like, no. It's like, well, then pick yourself out of it.
Yeah, so where are you living then, you see? Where do you go? And this is, I think that's the uncomfortable part for people with spirituality, is you tell them that they don't know where else to go. And that's our job then as coaches and teachers, to help people find, where do they want to live? Where do they reside within themselves?
Well, I think you teed us up for the next chat on the uncomfortable truth on desire. So I think we're going to come back to that one. I just want to say thank you to both of you. I just, a couple, sentiment from my side is, hey, don't listen to every thought, as Fred mentioned. Don't put evidence where it doesn't exist. And to Indira's point, trust when the noise, the clutter, the thoughts, let's say emotions pass. What you'll be left with is a still mind and a wise heart. And let's give that heart some more love than we probably do day to day. And maybe that's a place you can go to, is your heart. So thank you both very much. Absolutely love this, and look forward to catching up with you both soon.
Thank you, guys. Let's do it.
It's really great.
Thanks,
See you. Bye for now.